Okay, Madam Chair, we are recording. You may go ahead and begin the meeting.
Welcome. It's 5:31 p.m. and I'm calling the December 7, 2021 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order. Please silence all cell phones, please. May we have a roll call?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Member Rose?
Yes, here.
Member Miller does not appear to have.
Oh, he's here. I
is he
see
here?
him.
Oh, there he is. Member Miller,
I'm here.
I see you. Thank you. Member Hanson,
Here.
Member Kaiser,
Here.
Vice Chair Nelson,
Okay.
and Chair Huff. Member Rosenau is excused this evening, so you have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. May we please have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of the Council Chamber and at the Planning Department counter by 6 p.m. this past Thursday, December 2nd, 2021.
Okay, does the board have any revisions or the staff have any revisions to the agenda? Mr. Lyon?
May I suggest that the Las Palmas Business Historic District item be put to the end of the agenda of new business so that that one might take a little bit longer and we can get the other ones out of the way more quickly.
That sounds like a very good idea. May I have a motion to approve the agenda with an adjustment to move 4C and 4D ahead of 4B? A motion to
So
move.
moved.
Okay, Mr. Nelson made a motion and there's a second by
Second.
Mr. Rose. Is there any discussion about that?
Yeah. No.
Okay, no discussion. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and any opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0. Public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the historic site preservation on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items that are not listed on the posted agenda. There'll be 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for the public hearings will be taken later on at the time of the hearing. So staff, has anyone requested to comment on a non-public hearing item or an item that's not on today's agenda?
I believe we may have 1 or 2 individuals here this evening. If anybody is here wishing to speak during public comment, would you turn your camera on and unmute yourself?
I can't start my video. It won't let me.
It won't let me either.
Okay, Mr. Maruzzi, would you like to begin?
Sure. I'm excited to report that I was informed a few weeks ago by the keeper of the National Register in Washington that the Palm Springs Municipal Airport Terminal was formally listed in the National Register of Historic Places. This completes the grouping of the 4 Donald Wexler design properties that I nominated to the National Register over the past several years. These 4 being the Dinah Shore Residence of 1964, the Wexler Residence of 1954, the Steelhouse National Register Historic District, also known as Riviera Gardens, and this includes all 7 of the residences from 1962 and the 1966 Palm Springs Municipal Airport Terminal. It took extra time for the steel houses and airport terminal because they're located on the tribal reservation. That was the delay of those 2. The Palm Springs Modern Committee plans on celebrating these listings in probably March or April, and we'll let you know when and where in the coming weeks. And that's it.
Wonderful. Congratulations and thanks for all of your efforts. That's a huge endeavor and we greatly appreciate your good work. Thank you.
Congrats, Peter. And when I moved to Palm Springs, you were my inspiration for all of this. And I'm super proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Dunning, did you want to speak here during public comment?
Yes, I would like to. Can I have my camera turned on? Let's see here. Hold on. There we go. Hello, everybody. I know some of you. My name is Brad Dunning, and I am here as a representative of the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, and was many, many years ago a board member of your esteemed Historic Site Preservation Board, way back in 1996 to about 1999, I think. And those were the very dark ages. I am speaking to you today about two buildings next door to each other at 370 and 380 North Palm Canyon, both built approximately early 40s, 1944, maybe even one of them 1946 or earlier, in the Mediterranean style. One was temporarily used at some point for city council meetings, and one we think might have been a bowling alley and even used by soldiers under General Patton during World War II when they were stationed in the area. We're still researching all of this. This issue just came to our attention very recently. These buildings are remarkably intact for their age and have survived relatively unscathed for over 75 years. My comments today have absolutely nothing to do with the style or validity of the proposed modernism museum for these sites, but our concern is what the new owners are planning to do to the original facades, basically obliterate them. I don't know, let's see if you can, some of you may recognize some of these buildings. That's what it used to look like. It looks exactly like that today. Here's the one next door, which is actually more attractive. If you see the second-story apartments, and it's almost entirely intact today. I took these photos yesterday. This is what the new owners are planning to do with those two Mediterranean style buildings. It's basically a very plain stucco box with fixed aluminum windows and a sort of mid-century signifier of a folded plate roof attached to the top. This block falls just outside of the Las Palmas Historic District, and the buildings might not be on the city survey of historic resources, although we feel one is, as the description very aptly fits the building, but the building is incorrectly addressed as 376. We feel it would be tragic to wipe out these historic and easily restored original facades for such a bland replacement. And if things go per protocol, these buildings will come before your review. But the potential tragic loss of these historic building facades, which have survived for decades, deserve to live on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dunning.
Madam Chair, our next speaker will be Jarvis Crawford.
Hello, how are you all doing? Can you guys hear me fine? Okay, I'm speaking and my phone was going in and out when you were talking about agenda items and non-agenda items, but I am speaking regarding the Frank Bogart statue and being in favor of removal of that. I know it is no longer on the agenda. I believe it was on the agenda before, but I wanted to know, should I just wait to finish these comments for next meeting? But I am in favor of removal of the Frank Bogart statue.
We welcome your comments at this meeting, and you're welcome to join in our future meetings as well. So thanks so much for that comment.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Madam Chair, our next speaker will be David W.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me speak. I also am speaking on agenda item 3A, the moving of the Frank Bogart statue from in front of City Hall. And I know it's going to be discussed at the next meeting, but I want to remind everybody at this board that the City Council has issued their decision to move the statue. And what I think this board's responsibility is at this point is to figure out how the statue moves, where it moves, and how does it maintain, follow the laws and ordinances of the state. But I would urge the board to consider that, the statue is placed in front of City Hall. It was not built when City Hall was built. And personally, I don't feel that it has a relationship as part of the historic nature of City Hall. It's just placed in front of the City Hall on the lawn, on the grass. I know it's going to be discussed at the following meeting. I just wanted to quickly kind of mention that I think the City Hall had a very involved process, or the City Council and the Human Rights Commission had a very involved process, got a lot of feedback on both sides of this issue. And ultimately, our elected City Council voted 5-0 to remove the statue. And I think that it's really incumbent on this board to make that happen, because that is the directive from our City Council. And thank you very much.
David, would you mind giving me your last name so I can put it correctly into the minutes?
Absolutely. My last name is Weiner, W-E-I-N-E-R.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Chair, Janelle Hunt is our next speaker. Ms. Hunt, would you go ahead?
Yes, hi, my name is Janelle Hunt, and I too am in favor of removal of the Frank Boger statue. I do not feel like the Frank Boger statue needs to be placed downtown either. I do believe that it belongs on the Frank Boger statue. And as Davis stated, it was voted City Council 5-0. So let's go ahead and move forward with the removal and how that's going to look. And if you need any input on that, there are a lot of people out in the community that are willing to help and assist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Madam Chair, I don't have anyone else who's indicated that they wish to speak under public comment.
No other speakers. Okay, seeing no additional speakers, we will proceed to the consent agenda. The approval of the minutes of November 2, 2021. Are there any revisions to the minutes of the meeting? Mr. Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hop. Just a quick note on page 4 of 6, under item 4B, it says staff member line from the staff report, and then it mentioned Sean Harris representing the owner. Just a name correction is all. Sean's name is spelled S-H-A-U-N, not S-C-A-N. And that's the only thing I've got. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 2 with the name correction that Mr. Nelson indicated?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So I have a motion by Mr. Rose and a second by Mr. Miller. Is there any discussion about the minutes? So all those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm assuming I'm abstaining because I did not attend the meeting.
Okay. All right. So the motion passes 5-0 with one abstention. Let us proceed to agenda item 2A, public hearings. An application by Charles and Patricia Stump, owners for the historic designation of the William Purcell residence located at 252 East Ocotillo Avenue. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
The owners of this property have applied for historic designation of their home, known as the William Purcell residence, located at 252 East Ocotillo Drive. The building is significant because of its association with its designer and architect, William Gray Purcell, who is an internationally known architect and contemporary of Frank Lloyd Wright, whose architectural commissions contributed to the development of the American Prairie School of Architecture. It's the only known commission by Purcell that we know of in the Coachella Valley. The staff report on page 3 goes into some detail on the chain of ownership. And as we've noted here, the ones that we do see through the chain is primarily one that Mr. Purcell's associate, James Van Evera Bailey, appears to have purchased the lot. And then as the home was being completed in a collaboration between the two of them, the title was then conveyed over to Purcell. And Purcell owned it for a short period of time as an investment property, and then it was sold off several times subsequent to that. The current owners purchased the home in 1980. On page 3 of your staff report, I provide a bit of information and background on William Gray Purcell. Purcell was a graduate of the Cornell University School of Architecture in a very long time ago in 1903. He lived in Oak Park, and during his early years, he had worked with architecture in an architect, in Minneapolis by the name of George Fike. He later included George Elmsley, and it was primarily in his work with Elmsley that Purcell and Elmsley did a prolific amount of work in the Prairie style and are known as having the largest number of commissions in that style of architecture, second only after Frank Lloyd Wright. The design of this particular home is an interesting story relative to Mr. Purcell. At age 50, Purcell was diagnosed with a severe case of tuberculosis, and he came out to Banning, California, and checked himself into a sanatorium in order to try to recover from that illness. During the 4 years that he was there, he undertook the design and construction of the home on Ocotillo Avenue that is the subject of your report. Purcell was joined by his longtime colleague, James Van Evera Bailey. Bailey had worked with Purcell in the Portland area, and during the Great Depression, lacking work, followed Purcell down here to Southern California, and they worked together to accomplish the design and construction of this home. And as you will have seen in the Historic Resources report, there was quite an extensive amount of actual correspondence that occurred back and forth between Purcell and Bailey around almost every single detail about the design and construction of this home, which was quite interesting. Shortly after the completion of the home in 1934-35, Purcell moved to the Pasadena area where he lived for about another 30 years. And during that 30 years where he was no longer practicing architecture, he published prolifically his views and theories about architecture and espousing the notion of a uniquely American style architecture, which is around the notion of what the Prairie School architects were also seeking to achieve. The property that was developed here on Ocotillo Avenue was developed speculatively. Purcell and Bailey did the home assuming it would be a rental property. And as you saw in your report, there was some colorful dialogue back and forth between the two of them. They paid an enormous amount of money of $400 for the lot, and they were struggling to keep a Depression era household construction budget under $2,400, which is pretty remarkable, but they feel, as you saw the notes there, they weren't going to make a penny at that price. The home is particularly unique in its overall architecture in that this really is representing probably the earliest known modernist structure done in a residence in Palm Springs or maybe the Coachella Valley. The Pompano Cabin has been recognized also as one of the earliest modernist structures here in the desert. It's no longer extant. And this one appears to be the oldest in Palm Springs in terms of that particular style. We've identified similar early buildings in the modernist style being the Oasis Hotel, 1925, the Cork and Bottle Building, 1936, the Coker Sampson Building, 1935. And so this building in 1934 really represents one of the very earliest in the modernist style of architecture that we've seen here in Palm Springs. There's an illustration of the home on the bottom of page 4 from the architectural drawings in which you can see the influences of the Prairie style aesthetic in this, with lots of long horizontal lines that are emphasized by a board and batten type of wood paneling. On the top of page 5, I've shown some details of that board and batten type of siding that the current owner, Charles and Patricia Stump, showed you during your site visit to the home. There you can see on the top of that page a piece of the profile from that tongue and groove sort of board and batten system. So going further and beginning on page 7 of your staff report, we've begun the analysis of the report and the findings, and we believe that the house qualifies under 3 of the criteria for historic significance. The first being associated with the lives of persons who have made a meaningful contribution, that being William Gray Purcell, in terms of his long career in architecture that is recognized at an international level. And earning him, as I mentioned earlier, literally a place side by side with such greats as Frank Lloyd Wright and Louis Sullivan. The home, we also believe, represents or is reflective and exemplifies the period of development here in Palm Springs that we refer to as the period between the wars, 1919 to 1941, in which a number of early modernist buildings were being developed here in town. And I referenced this a bit on the top of page 8 on your staff report. The Purcell residence was somewhat unique also in that it was constructed of concrete masonry units with the accent panels of wood, where most modest homes of the Depression era were primarily wood frame with stucco. So we're seeing a unique, different use of material on this particular house. And then we've also identified it under criteria 5, that it represents the work of a master architect whose architectural genius has influenced his age and possesses high artistic value. We've made this assertion both in terms of his career and the prolific amount of work done during his active years with Purcell and Elmsley, and also in his later years for 30-some years, in which he did a great deal of writing and publishing on his theories of architecture. So for those reasons, we've asserted significance under an individual person, under the period, and as the architect of significance. The property is evaluated for the features of integrity, beginning on page 10 of your staff report. And I think the biggest challenge that you're going to need to consider on this particular house is the issue of design integrity. Certainly from a quick view of the home, when you see the original photos, and I'll show you actually some of these images on my other screen here, if I may, bear with me a second. So I can share this. Oh boy, I can never find this stupid thing. Bear with me a moment, please. I'm sorry. Here we go. All right. I trust you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So as we noted, this is the way the home appears, both in its current state on the right and the original state on the left, circa 1934. Here you can see that the overall massing, the volumes, the overall proportions, the eaves, the wind fenestration, and so on are very, very similar one to the other. You can definitely recognize this house as being what it was from 1934. The original exposed concrete, brick, and wood have been covered over with stucco. Here you begin to really understand and see the connection between the design aesthetic of this building and the theories of the exposure of natural material in reference to the typical prairie school buildings with strong horizontality and cantilevered roofs and so on. Here's another close-up of the unique method of construction that we saw for the wood portions. I've noted that this is particularly unique. I have never seen this before in a home where you've got actually a tongue and groove style of board and batten. I did not identify this as one of the issues of significance under the criteria because it has been covered up. And so I've left that out, but I did feel it was distinctive enough and worth mentioning. The massing and fenestration, as I mentioned earlier, is similar. However, I want to point out, if you hadn't noticed earlier, the design of the dining room window here, and you see on the left and over here on the right have been changed. They look like they were changed shortly thereafter because the type of window here matches perfectly with the type of window you see elsewhere in the house. Also, this small piece of eave was extended over that dining room window, I believe, by the current owner. Here you see some of the issues in comparison of the home, and it's what would basically be the eastern side of the front facade. The original 1934 image here on the right and the current image on the left. The low garden wall that you see in front exists from the period of significance as well. And you will note, as I talked to you in the field, over here by the entrance, the current owner did raise this projected eave slightly at the door because all of his children were very tall and it kept them from bumping into their heads. So the historic significance, again, in summarizing, person of significance exemplifies the period, master architect. Historic integrity, we've talked about it in terms of the issue of design, and I've suggested that it does retain sufficient integrity, that the removal of the stucco would certainly strengthen the integrity, as would replacing the garage door and the eave over the front entry. Let me see if I can now get back to my regular screen. There we go. And then further, as just summarizing and talking about the issues under integrity, which are kind of interesting on this particular one, as you'll note on page 11, some of these images actually show the setting of what this building was in 1934. And as you can see, there was almost nothing else in this neighborhood. You were really, truly out on the edge of the city when this thing was built, which is kind of an interesting thing. Also on page 12, there's an interesting photo that was also provided by the owner and applicant, where you see a comparison of a typical simplified Spanish colonial revival or vernacular style home with a clay tile roof and so on, next door to the Purcell residence, which stands out strikingly in its modernist style. The defining characteristics are outlined in your staff report on page 13. I won't read through them, but we basically, the ones that we are identifying that are non-contributing are the stucco exterior finish, the front windows of the garage, the wood front door, the raised eave above the front door, the additions on the back of the home, and the landscaping. That concludes my staff report. The owner, I think, is not here today. He was going to possibly check in via telephone. I see we have one individual here with a telephone number. I don't know if that's him or not. But that concludes my staff report, and I'm available to answer any other questions you may have. And this is a public hearing.
Okay, so this will be the time that the board may have any questions of staff. And I did have one question. I enjoyed looking at the original photographs and the wonderful original drawings, done by the architect. And I just wanted to confirm, is it correct that the original key exterior materials, that being the wood and the concrete block, do we believe that they have been preserved under the stucco?
We're quite certain that the masonry, the concrete masonry units are there. Mr. Stump believes that the horizontal wood members are beneath the upper area shown in the drawings earlier. When he bought the home in 1980, those areas were covered in plywood. So he does not know for certain whether the board and batten still exists there, but certainly we are quite certain that the masonry units exist.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board to Mr. Lyon? Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, just one question for staff regarding one of the non-contributing elements being the landscape, and whether if the board so chose, if we could stipulate in our motion, however we do decide, that the old smoke tree out in front of the house could be designated as part of historic landscape or not.
Did we have something that would verify that it was from the period of significance?
Just by the nature of its height and size, it's clearly quite old. It appears to be at least 80 years old. So that would be the only thing.
Mhm.
We may be able to look in the additional photos that Mr. and Mrs. Stump have and see if we could actually verify if that tree was there or not. Certainly that could be a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, Madam Chair, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did just notice that the telephone number we have here on the screen, 6993, are the Stumps. And Mr. Stump or Mrs. Stump, if you do wish to speak at any time here, once the public hearing is open, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and you're welcome to speak.
Good. Okay. So more questions? Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I have a question, actually clarifying your question regarding the exterior wood. The staff report under criterion 2 design A, it does say that the current owner reports the siding has been removed by a previous owner and plywood installed.
That part was written actually before I went to the site where he
Okay.
clarified, and maybe he can speak to that issue since he is here with us.
Okay.
I understood when I first was speaking with him that it had been removed when we were at the site having conversations. He thought it might still be under there, so maybe he can clarify that for us tonight.
Okay.
Okay. And any other questions of the board? Mr. Miller?
Yes, I could ask, if I could ask Ken to briefly summarize what the difference of a class 1 and a class 2 historic resource is briefly.
Sure. A class 1 has met both one or more of the significance criteria, that being, people, events, persons, so on, as well as having meeting the findings for having significantly good integrity, that most of the factors of integrity are present. That would be class 1. If you have a building that is lacking in integrity, then that would be a qualification for class 2.
Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions of the board? No other questions? Okay, seeing no further questions of the staff, I will open the public hearing. Now, this is a time for the applicant to speak. Mr. Stump, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the application? If you would, please come on board and state your name and address. And you have 10 minutes to present, and then 2 minutes of rebuttal if desired after other public comments. So Charles, are you there? So Mr. Stump, you can unmute.
Do we have a way of unmuting him?
Unfortunately, no, we do not. They will need to unmute themselves.
Okay.
I don't know how they would do that from a telephone.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Maybe you could hold up a piece of paper that says unmute.
Well, I think he can hear, but I don't think he can unmute. Let me suggest this. Let me continue with that. I will, if they're able to hear, he can call into my direct telephone number if he wants, and I can put him on speakerphone, and we can resolve the communication issue in that way. So, Mr. Stump, if you are listening, my direct line is 760-322-8364, extension 8786. And if you want to dial in right now, I will pick that up and we'll put you on speakerphone and you can address the board to any degree you want. And if we don't get a call in, then I guess just move forward if that's the case.
So as a matter of procedure, while we're waiting, could we proceed to other members of our audience that wish to speak in the public comment on this item?
Sure.
If so, would you give your name and address? And you have 3 minutes. So are there any other names that have been submitted? Anyone?
No one else has submitted to us, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I would also
So-
just note for Mr. Stump's benefit, Mr. Bernheimer did note that *6 on your phone will unmute you. So *6 on your phone, Mr. Stump, will unmute you if you do wish to speak. There we go.
Oh,
Well, hello.
Hello.
Yes, I've been trying several times, but apparently I didn't hold it long enough. So what was the question?
would you
Or
like?
or you just,
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your project? We're very interested in knowing about the wood that is under the stucco, because that's a very important part of the structure. Can you tell us what you know? Is the wood preserved under the stucco?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
The fellows that owned it before us had started restoring the project, and it was in really bad disrepair. And they just put some rough sawn plywood over the existing part of the existing wood, and the rest of it was all open. So I'm pretty sure that the original is there, although it was weathered certainly, but intact. And because I put just the facade of stucco over the rest of it, which was all of the garage area, and otherwise, and it was a bit of a mistake on my part to cover the masonry with just a thin stucco coat. It's very thin. It's just what they call the color coat. But it's all there intact as it was, and you can still see the formation of the rows of cement blocks and so on. But and the only other thing would have been the overhangs. They were more vented than they are now, but when we bought the house, why, they had already been enclosed and covered with some paneling. Other than that, everything I think is quite intact underneath the facade.
Right.
Thank you. We enjoyed looking at all your historical photographs and the drawings that you had saved, and the correspondence and documentation. So, that's very important for the history to have that documentation. So we appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to support your application?
Well, one of the main things that occurs to me is that we needed to share this history that we had here. It occurred through a series of happenstance, and we've been sitting on it for quite a few years because of the stucco. I've thought, well, maybe it wouldn't even qualify, but the more I've talked to Ken, and the more I've realized it does. It needs to be preserved, and all of the history that we have, which is just you saw just a portion of it, is significant for the city and for the early development of modernism in the city of Palm Springs.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the public comment on this item? Anyone else? Okie dokie. So seeing no further speakers on this item, I will close the public hearing. The action is now with the board for the board to discuss and decide what you want to know more about this work. So any discussion? Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, if Mr. Stump is still on the line, I would love to find out if he could tell us if he knows how old the smoke tree out front is, if it was there when he moved in, and about how tall it was at that time.
Oh, the tree? I did plant it about 40 years ago.
Okay.
So,
Did I do
Mr.
that correctly?
Yes, yes. I planted two and it survived. It's the one that survived.
Okay,
Wow. Good to know. Thank you.
that's amazing. That's amazing. It's hard to plant smoke trees. So that's really.
I know.
That's amazing. Okay, any other discussion of the board? Ms. Jansen?
Hanson.
Jansen. Yeah, Jansen.
I just wanted to say how impressed I was with the stumps for all the material that they put together, and this effort and all that they found out about it, and really felt like this was something more than they had realized it was when they purchased the property. And for nominating this, I think it's an extremely important property in terms of meeting the criteria for all the reasons stated in the staff report by Mr. Lyon. But I do have some concerns about the integrity of the property as a Class 1 resource. I would certainly absolutely support a Class 2. But I'd like to maybe see what the other board members, if you have any concerns about the integrity. I mean, I feel like, so much of the important character defining features originally, have been removed from the building. And it certainly, from the street anyway, contains, or it still reflects, the massing and the overall shape of the building, but so many of the important features are missing or covered up. And I'm also wondering, as a Class 1 with so many alterations, if somebody wanted to come in and make further alterations to something that's already altered, what exactly does that mean? I mean, what would you accomplish by doing a Class 1 nomination?
Well, in terms of your question of what if somebody else wanted to come in and do further alterations, if it were to be designated, regardless of Class 1 or Class 2, it would be required to go through a certificate of appropriateness for any proposed alterations.
Yeah, I just think procedurally, it's kind of difficult to, again, when something's been that altered, to tell someone they can't alter it again. I think a Class 2 would certainly bring the attention to the property that the property owner had hoped to do. And it might actually encourage a future property owner to take on the renovations and remove the materials. And, then you would have a great project. And then can you come back and do a Class 1 if there's some restoration?
It can be reapplied. It can be reapplied by a future homeowner, yes.
I'm just, I just welcome the rest of your comments on that.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you, Ms. Hanson. I'm supportive of Class 2 and have the same reservations that you have about, Class 1 and that original wood that's under the stucco I'm concerned about. So other discussions, Mr. Rose?
Yeah, I'm really concerned about, the condition of the house. I really thank the applicant. I think it's, we all do this because we're passionate about preservation. And, the last thing we want to do is have policies that preclude people from wanting to come in and protect great architecture. So it's a slippery slope. I'm really borderline even on Class 2. I think that the alterations of the house, there's sort of an outline of a house that once was there, but it's so significantly altered. It's scary. There's attachments in the back that are tumors, and as far as I'm concerned, are malignant tumors. I think that the concrete block is covered, the board and batten is covered, the facade has been altered, the landscape is completely different. It just sort of goes on, and our job also is to protect the integrity of these buildings, and it's just been so altered. And I don't, you know, you think about some of the others houses that have received class 2 or what, you know, in the past, and it's just not even on the same planet. So it's a little shocking that staff recommended class 1. I think it might be the enthusiasm of such an important architect and such a, you know, the fact that it even still exists in some form it is great. I would love to see some undertaking to try to remove the stucco and get at least the exterior in some of the original condition again before we you know, before we considered it. But again, I'm just concerned about the integrity aspect of it.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, I understand all of those comments and don't disagree with them at all. However, I would just like to note that in the staff report on page 13, it lists as non-contributing elements, stucco exterior finish, which arguably can be removed. It lists the front windows of the garage, which arguably can easily be removed. It lists a wooden front door, which arguably can be taken out and replaced with whatever was there. It lists the raised eave above the front door, which can be removed and returned back to what it was. The additions on the back of the home, which can also be removed. So none of these things are truly irreversible. And that's the thing about historic preservation and the ability to designate a home which can in the future be truly restored. I would argue that there is more integrity here than meets the eye. The house is in very good structural condition, and it presents exactly as it was intended when it was built. A lot of it is just cosmetic. So I've seen houses in far worse shape. So while I don't disagree with previous comments, I do think that this is a property that is so important because of its provenance and association with William Purcell, who was extremely important, and the fact that we are a city that celebrates modernism and that has become our golden egg, so to speak. So this is an important property, and I would support class 2 with the maybe the statement in the motion that a future owner, if they were able to remove the non-contributing element, could have it reclassified at that time. And that concludes my remarks. One more thing, actually, maybe for staff, because as staff had previously noted during the site visit, the Stumps, the current owners, are probably the people most longly associated with the property, 40 years plus. Yeah. If because they planted that smoke tree and they have been there for 40 plus years, you know, it might not be the period of significance, so to speak, but because they are the longest associated with the house, I think it's important that that smoke tree, you know, it becomes a symbol of that. And it would be great if it could always remain. So that would be my argument that it should stay. Thank you.
Mr. Rose.
Yeah, I respect Mr. Nelson's comments. I just would say that I don't think it's our job to put on x-ray glasses and, you know, sort of find how the house would be if the non-contributing factors were removed. I don't think that's, I think we're supposed to look at something as presented. Mm-hmm. Not the potential for, you know, preservation or renovation.
Further discussion? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I wanted to say I'm I'm very encouraged and very appreciative of Mr. and Mrs. Stump's efforts and interest in bringing attention to their beautiful home. It's clearly a unique sort of animal in early 30s Palm Springs. And while I'm a little dismayed at some of the changes that have happened over time, I'm certainly supportive of Class 2 designation because I think the association with William Purcell and the basic structure is there, and the uniqueness of this architectural gem is still very much intact, even though there have been material changes on the exterior. Like I said, I'm certainly supportive of Class 2 designation.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on this? Anyone else wish to make a statement or ask a question or comment? Okay, seeing no further discussion, may I have a motion, please? Mr. Kaiser?
I move that we designate this as a Class 2 property. Whether the smoke trees stays or not, you guys have to see if you want to add that or not. But the house is unusual. It has been hugely altered, but there is integrity underneath it. And by giving it a Class 2, it will be saved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Lyon?
Question, Mr. Kaiser, are you basing your recommendation on the findings in the staff report?
I agree with the findings of the staff report. The degree of alteration puts me to move that it be a Class 2.
Thank you.
Okay, so was there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Kaiser and a second by Mr. Miller. Is there further discussion, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I would agree with that, but also ask for an amendment that the non-contributing element of the landscape say that the smoke tree is an exception. So that would be the only feature of the landscape to be included in the Class 2 designation.
Would you accept that, Mr. Kaiser?
No, I wouldn't, because it's not the period of the house. It was added by this owner who I think it's wonderful. And I think the smoke tree is wonderful, but I don't think that that's what we're doing with this designation.
I agree.
Okay. We like smoke trees, but
We do.
correct. So, okay, any further discussion on the motion? Because I have a motion and I have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor to the motion, please say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 6-0. Let us proceed to unfinished business agenda item 3A. The City of Palm Springs requesting a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to Palm Springs City Hall, Class 1 historic site located on Talkwoods Canyon Way. The staff recommendation is to continue this item to a date certain of January 4, 2022. Is that correct, Mr. Lyon?
Yes, it is. Based on the request that came from the November meeting, we have solicited for historic resources report to further delineate and outline the historic character defining features of City Hall and to characterize the condition and status of the statue. And so we've not been able to get that report completed yet, but we have gotten a consultant selected. And we hope to have the report in time for your January meeting. If not, we will continue it until we'll recommend that you continue it until the February meeting, but we're going to work to try to get it ready for your consideration at the January meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyon. So may I please have a motion to continue this item? I'll make a motion to continue the item.
I second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Catherine Huff and a second by Janet Hansen. Is there any discussion about this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Was Ms. Hansen, was that a, you're muted, so you're muted, sorry. Unmute.
I'm good with it. I'm in
Oh,
favor.
okay, all right. Okay, thank you. So the motion passes 6-0. Let us proceed to new business, agenda item 4A. ABC Development owner requesting a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to the Robert Alexander residence, also known as the House of Tomorrow, a class historic site. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This property was recently designated a Class 1 historic site by the City Council. And you have seen and been on the site to understand the nature and scope of the proposed alterations. The applicant is now, because it is now a Class 1 historic site, seeking a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed alterations, which are summarized on the top of page 2, and I'll read through them very briefly. They're removing a non-permitted 5th bedroom located off the northwest corner of the home, removing the non-permitted garage doors and wall that enclose the carport, removing several non-original windows. They're reconstructing the backyard terrace and swimming pool, which I'll describe further in a moment. They're adding a 7-foot diameter in-ground spa. They're replacing all of the single pane windows and sliding glass doors with thermally insulated windows and door units, which are of a similar size, shape, and detailing as the original windows. Repainting the exterior of the home to its original color palette, miscellaneous other minor alterations that I'll describe shortly, and redesign of the landscape to be similar to the original landscape. In terms of the scope of work that they're considering that are minor alterations to the original home, on the bottom of page 2, the applicant is proposing a small roof deck to be located on the carport roof on the east side of the building that would be accessed off the master bath. The detailing for this proposed deck is shown in your staff report in the attachments. It's a very discreet and very minimalist in its appearance, with stainless steel cables and vertical posts that are very small. So we've looked at it as something that certainly is an alteration. It is slightly visible from the street, but we believe that it is inobtrusive enough and does not materially impair any of the character defining features of the home. So we were recommending approval on that detail. They're also looking at an alternative to the exterior terrazzo. If you recall, the initial challenge that they had was that they had removed entirely the exterior terrazzo pool terrace without permits. The terrazzo was badly deteriorated, and they were having problems with failed water lines that were underneath the terrazzo. They are proposing what is called a seeded concrete in lieu of the terrazzo, and all of you saw the sample of that at the site when you visited the site. They believe that this will come as closely as possible visually to reflecting the same surface material and color as the interior terrazzo, but it will be less slippery and more durable in the severe summertime heat that we have here in Palm Springs. So they are requesting approval that that exterior terrace, along with its steps and all the other detailing of it, be done in seeded concrete that will match as closely as possible to the terrazzo. Also, relative to the outdoor area, the replacement of the pool surfaces, they're proposing to put back in the same kind of original coping stones that the original pool had, as well as those that will be around the proposed hot tub will be done with a similar traditional style coping stone, so that it is an integral appearance with the existing pool once it's reconstructed. I mentioned the in-ground spa. This is on center line with the point of the pool. You can see it on the bottom of your staff report on page 3. It adds a contemporary use and enhancement to the home. Again, we felt at a staff level it was appropriate in the way that they were bringing it forward. The historic archival material will document that it was not original, but that it is being done in a material that is sympathetic and harmonious with the existing. And then lastly, there are some windows and things, as we mentioned, on the top of page 4, where the windows have been some of the windows that were there as clear story windows were unfortunately removed and small cheap sliders put in. They're going to restore all of those as well. The findings for making an affirmative decision on a certificate of appropriateness for this project begins on the bottom of page 4. And as we've reviewed all of this scope of work in this project, we do believe that this scope, as it's been outlined now, is appropriate. It is sensitive to the architectural significance of the home. The materials are sensitive to what was there originally. The removal of the non-permitted additions and enclosure of the carport are substantial and important in terms of restoring the overall volume and exterior appearance of the home, especially from the backyard, which is the primary outdoor entertaining space for this home. So we believe, in terms of the findings necessary, that this project can be found to be satisfactory and approvable for its certificate of appropriateness. The analysis of the project under CEQA is also provided in your staff report. I'm not going to go through that, but we believe it does conform with the Secretary of the Interior standards as outlined in the staff report. That concludes my staff report. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. And we have Mr. Bernheimer here, and that looks like, oh, and we have Dan and Paul here as well. We can answer any questions from the owner perspective that you may have.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for staff? Questions for staff from the board? Okay. Does the applicant wish to speak? Applicant wish to speak?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you. We're just here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so you have 3 minutes. If you'd like to share anything more about the project, or you're working so passionately to make this a wonderful project. Anything you'd like to say before we ask for questions?
Okay. No, I think you've all been to the site and spoken mostly to the applicants as well. So I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so board, are there any questions of the applicant? Any questions? Mr. Nelson? Unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Great. Just one question. With regard to the new steel cabling that's proposed outside the master bathroom at the upper elevation, I understand from the site visit and from the drawing, you're proposing that to be a stainless steel cable with an aluminum cap. And my question or concern rather is, because the current caging material that is there was painted to match the house and in effect almost disappeared, where this new aluminum cabling and stainless steel cabling will actually stand out from the new white color of the house. Was there any thought given to maybe painting the main railings white to match the house, or to use anything that would blend in more than just the aluminum? It's just a question.
Mr. Lyon?
I'll take a first stab at that, and then the applicant can certainly speak further to it. You might want to note within your packet, I believe it's on page 4 of the 11x17s, that part of the color palette that will be used here is a silver metallic paint that will be mounted, or that will be placed on the fascia. And so there actually will be a silver-like color surface on the home that the railings may tie in with. That was my only thought in listening to Jade's concern. But certainly, Dan or Paul, if you have further thoughts about that, speak up.
Yeah, I'll kick it over to them. Other than our discussions were that what was proposed would be the least obtrusive of anything, and putting it in a white or another color, we thought would actually stand out more than what was proposed. And Dan or Paul, if you have anything to add. You need to unmute.
Just one additional comment to build on what Ken was saying, is that the original windows were were anodized aluminum. And so the silver is a theme that carries out throughout the whole project. And in 2016, I had a wonderful opportunity to meet Mr. Purcell, and we said to ourselves, what would Mr. Purcell do in this situation? What happened is, there's the doors are there, the deck is there, and we wanted to enhance the livability of the house, but that's how we approached it, and felt it was really very much in keeping with the spirit of the original.
Great, thank you.
So are there other questions from the board? Any other questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve.
And I will second that.
Okay, Mr. Rose, do you accept the staff report?
100%.
Okay, so we have a motion by Member Rose and a second by Member Kaiser. Is there further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Good, motion passes 6-0.
Great
Thank you.
job, great job, guys. Great job,
Congratulations.
guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks,
Okay.
Ken, for all your help.
Good job.
Thank you. So let us proceed with new business. As we approve to move agenda item 4B after 4D. So let us proceed to agenda discussion item 4C. Application by Keith and Barbara Kisaya, owners for the historic designation of the George and Sadie Gilman residence located at 574 West Mariscal Road. And the staff recommendation is to receive the report and direct the staff to schedule site visits and a public hearing to consider this application. May I have a motion to that effect, please?
So move.
Okay, and is there a second? Okay, so I have a motion by Kaiser with a second by Miller. Is there any discussion about this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right.
Any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 6-0. Let us proceed to agenda item 4D. This is the application by Carlos Sorrello and Monica May, owners for the historic designation of the Robson and Helen Chambers residence located at 695 South Warm Sands Drive. The staff recommendation is to receive the report and direct staff to schedule site visits and a public hearing to consider this application. May I have a motion to that effect?
I so move.
Okay, I have
Second.
I have a motion by Member Hanson and a second by Rose. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 6-0.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I want to just make a footnote on these two. I have been lax prior to this. The ordinance requires that the HPO have a pre-submittal meeting with the applicants anytime a historic site designation application is forwarded for your consideration. I have had the pre-submittal meeting with Carlos and Monica, and I am working to schedule the pre-submittal hearing for the Gilman residence, and that'll take place probably either this week or next.
okay, thank you. So let us proceed to agenda item 4B, proposed amendment to Historic District Number 1, the Las Palmas Business Historic District. So staff report, please.
Okay. So as your staff report notes, The Las Palmas Business Historic District was established in 1986. It was our first designated historic district. Over time, the file was literally lost and discovered again in the early 2000s. And at that time, it was re-examined by the board and staff, a series of recommendations made, but it was not carried forward. We have since had two substantial ordinance revisions made, the one in 2019 and the one in 2020. And so I've decided to bring this forward for you. I would like to see us move the Las Palmas Business Historic District as a historic district into a stronger and more contemporary category of historic districts where it's representing and complying with what our current ordinances are. And I'll go into that a little bit as I review this. So on page 2 of your staff report is the existing boundaries as established in 1986 for the Las Palmas Business Historic District. There are 49 parcels. Of those, only 17 were identified as contributing. One parcel that was previously not identified has been designated as a Class 1 site, which is the Coker Sampson building. And of the 17 contributing resources, 4 of them are single-family homes that do not reflect the business commercial context of the district. So the issues are as follows, and this is the reason why I'm asking you to struggle with this one and take it on tonight. 1, there is no identified period of significance. There is no identified context statement or statement of significance. Less than 1/3 of the parcels in the current district boundaries are designated as contributing. Significant mid-century properties in the district should be added to the contributing list. Certain properties that are listed as contributing should be removed. The district boundaries need to be adjusted in order to raise the total number of contributing properties to the majority of properties in the proposed district. And then there's no written evaluation of each parcel, nor how it does or does not contribute to the significance of the district. And then the design guidelines need revision in order to better reflect the historic context and the standards for architectural, recognizing the architectural diversity that's in the district. So I provided a little information in terms of how this thing has been analyzed. And back in 2015, at the board's request, the city secured the services of Historic Resources Group, a professional consultant, and they provided a substantial amount of analysis of the district, including review of the sites and the putting together information for your consideration on the proposed period of significance and other factors. And their research, as I noted on page 3, is summarized as one of the attachments in your report from November 5th, 2015. So the proposed, I'm going to take this kind of block by block and ask you to review these things, and I have a recommendation for you on each of them. As summarized on page 4, the Las Palmas Business Historic District is comprised of a disparate collection of small 1- and 2-story commercial buildings of varying architectural styles. The business district developed over several decades, with most of the buildings being constructed between the 1920s through the 1960s. Thus, the significance of the district lies not in the common architectural theme, but rather in its ability to convey information about the expansion and growth of business and commercial development outside of the original small village core. So my first recommendation, adopt the following statement for the Las Palmas Business Historic District, that the context is that the Las Palmas Business Historic District developed over several decades from the 20s through the 60s. It contains noteworthy buildings designed in a variety of architectural styles, reflecting the evolution of prevailing architectural taste from traditional revival styles to modern. Its significance lies in its ability to reflect this evolutionary period in the commercial development along the city's principal commercial corridor as the city rapidly expanded beyond the original small village core. And Madam Chair, I will, whatever way you want to consider digesting these things, I thought perhaps we can read through these all, and then if you want to take them on one by one, or you may act on these various recommendations as we go. Do you have a preference?
I would like to look at them and act on them individually.
Okay,
If
then let's stop here for a minute, and we can have a brief discussion about the context statement. Currently, the district has no context statement, and I am proposing this context statement to be adopted. My recommendation is that you adopt this as the context statement for the district.
So moved.
Okay. So is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Rose and a second by Mr. Miller. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Nelson has a hand raised.
Yeah.
Where are you? Oh, I'm sorry. I moved too quickly. Pardon me.
Yeah,
Mr. Nelson, discussion.
I think it needs to be discussed very quickly. So the beginning sentence from the 20s through the 1960s, can we further define that? Can we say 1920 to 1969, or is that good enough?
You may do that.
I think that's important.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it says,
1920 to 1969.
okay, instead of through the 60s, you want it. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Rose, do you accept that amendment, slight change to the motion to accept it?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
Okay.
6-0.
Okay, on to the next step. So as noted in the HRG report, from the 1880s to the 1920s, the commercial center of Palm Springs remained in the vicinity of Palm Canyon and Tockwitz Canyon Drives. Although several large tracts of land north of the small village center were subdivided for residential development in the 1920s, other than Francis Stevens School and the El Mirador Hotel and Garage, only scattered residential development existed in the vicinity of the Las Palmas Business Historic District. The 30s through the 50s saw the greatest concentration of new commercial construction. Since roughly 1969, the development in the district has been mostly infill. So, recommendation number 2, establish the period of significance for the Las Palmas Business Historic District to be from 1920 to 1969. And this reflects Jade's amendment to the earlier context statement.
Very good. So do we need another motion on that?
Yes,
okay.
please.
Motion, Mr. Rose. And is there a second?
A second.
Okay. Member Hanson, second. So motion by Rose, second by Hanson. Is there discussion about this recommendation? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? None. Okay, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Now we come on to some of the tougher parts. Pursuant to our current ordinance, a historic district must contain contributing resources on a majority of sites within the district. It may include non-contributing properties only to the extent necessary to establish appropriate, logical, or convenient boundaries. In terms of evaluating integrity, I have a quote here that I've lifted from the National Register. A property must retain key exterior materials dating from the period of its historic significance. If the property is being rehabilitated, the historic materials and significant features must have been preserved. The property must the property must be an actual historic resource, not a recreation. A recent structure fabricated to look historic is not eligible. Likewise, a property whose historic features and materials have been lost and reconstructed is usually not eligible. So This is the tough meat of this particular project. I am recommending that the following 11 properties retain their contributing classification. That being, and I'm going to refer to these by their common names because I think most of you know them more by their common names. The De Anza Hotel, the Harlow Haven Hotel, the Francis Stevens School and Park, Colony Palms Hotel, the Alcazar Hotel, the Clifton Dental Building, the Coker Sampson Building, the Palmer Apartments, Los Arboles Hotel, the Pacific Building, and the El Paseo Building. I am proposing changing the following 6 properties from non-contributing to contributing because they contribute to the significance of the district and they meet the eligibility requirements to qualify. Those buildings are as follows. These are the ones that I'm proposing be moved from non-contributing to contributing. That would be beginning with the Backstrom Reed Building, the Henry Reed Clinic, which is Jake's currently, the Dollard Building, the Toronay Building, the Clark and Frey Office Building, and the Nichols Building. Are any of you, I mean, we have a couple of new members here, but are any of you not familiar with these buildings by their common name? Do I need to further describe what we're talking about? Okay, good. The next part, on the middle of page 5, remove the 3 single-family residential structures from the historic district that were identified as contributing in 1986 because they do not conform to the business theme and context of the district. Establish them as individual Class 1 historic sites at a later date. These include the Conklin residence, the Schwartz residence, and the Cushman residence. Part 4, retaining the non-contributing classifications for the following 10 properties. These are properties that are currently non-contributing, and I'm recommending that they stay that way. That would be the Cheney Apartments, the building in which Berba is located. Sorry, bear with me a moment. The building in which Cheeky's is located, which is a portion of the old Reed Clinic. The Security Pacific Bank, which is 750 North Palm Canyon. The Sampson Curtis Building. This is the 1-story building immediately south of the Coker Sampson Building. The El Paseo Market. The Simsarian Plumbing Building. The parking lot that's adjacent to that. The Crawford Apartments or Village Inn. And 882, 888 North Palm Canyon Drive, which is a nondescript retail building. Those are ones that are non-contributing that I'm recommending stay non-contributing. The following, now I'm on to the next one. I'm in the middle of page 6. Changing the following 3 properties from contributing to non-contributing because they have been significantly altered such that they no longer convey the historic significance relative to the context of the district. That would be the Henry Reed Clinic, that portion of it which we commonly have known as the Tchotchkes Building, the Whitewater Mutual Water Company Building, and the Palm Springs Florist Building. The next section is removing 15 non-contributing parcels from the district boundaries that do not contribute to its significance.
Guys, I hate to interrupt. I'm having internet and cell issues. So if I drop off, I'm going to keep trying to get back in. I just want to alert you. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So part 6, there are 15 non-contributing buildings around the periphery of the current district. This is an important component because in order to get us to a majority number of sites as contributing, we really need to remove some of these non-contributing sites to get the numbers better balanced. And so quickly, I'll review these. It is the Turner Residence, the villas at the Movie Colony, the current building in which Copley's Restaurant is located, the Del Jaimo Lodge Apartments, the Ambassador Hotel, also currently known as the Triada, the Hollowell Building, the Adolph Israel Building, The San Jacinto Hotel, also known as the Movie Colony Hotel. 777 North Palm Canyon Drive, which is a mixed-use building. 803 North Palm Canyon Drive, which is a newer condominium retail building. 849, which is the old US Post Office building. 860 North Indian, which is an apartment complex. 861 to 865, the Culver Nichols Realty Office and RC Maury Medical Office. And the last one is 888 North Indian Canyon Drive, currently known as the Barefoot Inn. In summary, these changes will improve the percentage of contributing properties in the district. They will strengthen the commercial theme, and they will add important post-war commercial buildings that were not considered in the establishment of the district in 1986. So our numbers go as follows. The total number of properties would be 29. The total number of contributing would be 17. Non-contributing would be 11. And the total number removed would be 18. So my fourth recommendation is to adopt the changes recommended in that section above.
Are there any questions, board questions of the staff?
I don't have a question. I just want to say good job.
Wow.
I drove and walked a lot of it yesterday.
Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I concur that staff has done a remarkable job with this. I do have some issues with quite a few of the properties, and I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. Firstly, in section 3, of the building that is proposed for removal from contributing is 3A, 265 East via Altamira, Conklin residence, using the justification that it's residential. But this particular property has not been lived in for quite some time, and it is not, for any intents and purposes, currently a home. It has been long a private club for elite male citizens of Palm Springs. So there's that whole topic. But anyway, I would concur that this is a very important part of the district and that it should be kept as contributing for the reason that it is used in that manner and not as a private residence. And it still retains a high level of exterior integrity and the way it presents its exterior facade to the street. My other question, this is more of a correction for staff regarding items 4G and 4H. I think they meant 4G to say 844 North Palm Canyon Drive. And then 4H would be 850 North Palm Canyon, which was the actual Symposium building. So 4G was 844, and that was an addition or a part of the original Symposium, whereas 850 was the original Symposium building. So just wanted to point that out. I too am very familiar with the Business Historic District and have walked it many, many times. The other item I have issue with is 5A, changing the classification of the following properties from contributing to non-contributing because they have been significantly altered such that they no longer convey historic significance. I would argue that A and B, the first one being referred to as the Henry Reed Clinic and today known as Interior Illusion, just north of the restaurant Tricky. I would argue that it still retains more than sufficient historic integrity. The general massing of the building and the way it presents to the street is exactly or very similar to the way it was when it was built. The main difference being that part of an overhang was cut off. A circular driveway was removed just to allow pedestrian access to go along the street. And also a red tile roof was removed. So other than those, it still appears very much in the same configuration. It presents being more modern now than Spanish, but a red tile roof could always be put back on the building. So that's my feeling on that particular one. And then 5B 844 North Palm Canyon, the Whitewater Mutual Water Company building, is an early commission by John Porter Clark. And some previous historic group assessments have said that the changes were reversible. So I would agree that can be taken back to how it appeared back then. And if you look at the before photo and compare it with today, the changes really are not that dramatic or significant to the point that, in my opinion, it's no longer significant. Item 6L, which is 849 North Palm Canyon Drive, the side of the restaurant, 849. That was originally the first post office in town. The architects were Victor Gruen and Associates, for the record. And that front facade still presents almost original. I would say 90% or more of that front facade is still there, including the entry steps to the building. Granted, the inside has changed, the use has changed, but when I give my tours of the Uptown Design District, my walking tours, people always marvel at that facade of the post office. And I show them the before photo from when it was built, and they can still see it. They can see it all, and they just think it's wonderful. And I feel that it is more of a contributor than a non-contributor. Again, my own personal opinion. And then finally, I think it's worth mentioning that item 6O, the very last one in the summary of the properties, 888 North Palm Canyon, 888 North Indian Canyon Drive. The research was able to conclusively find the year it was built, and the year was 1955. And according to local historian Stephen Keelan, it was designed by local architect Herbert W. Burns. I take that back, Burns was not an architect, he was a designer, but nevertheless, just as important. And it was built as the Starlighter, Starliter, not the conventional spelling. And the Starlight Room, spelled Starlite, was a big deal at the Chi Chi Club. And I think that this name may have derived from the Starlight Room at the Chi Chi. But it also fits, with the litany of names that Bones had for his places around town, which were just great, like the Town and Desert and the Village Manor and the Desert Ho, and so it kind of fits in with all those. It was built by a mother-daughter, Phoebe Keeler, and her daughter, Bernice. So they were a building contractor, mother-daughter team. So that's pretty cool. It definitely adds to the history. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't disagree that it has been heavily altered, that last one, 6O, but I just wanted everyone to be aware of the history on that. And then just finally, one comment. Originally, we had 49 properties in this district as deemed in 1986. And some of these buildings I have mentioned were in their present condition in 1986. So they had already been altered or had red tile roof removed. So I think a lot of this was based on early history, and I think was based around the people that were associated with these buildings, who were pioneers and who were deeply important to the history of that area. So, I mean, that is half of historic preservation, is the people and, the people who created the place and so forth. But this whole plan is reducing this district by a total of 20 properties. And that's pretty major. I see that we're removing things and we're adding things, and I love the things that we're adding. I think they are so instrumental and so crucial, especially the Backstrom Reed building, which should be noted was by Harlem Georgescu, And that has been confirmed by Maria Verstappen, who works at Trina Turk. Her husband's father was Harlem Georgescu, and he had his papers, and it confirmed that he is in fact the actual designer of that building, not Howard Lapham. So that would conclude my observations and remarks, and I hope you all appreciate those. Thank you.
Wow, Member Nelson, thank you so much for your thorough research, all that time you put into that, and all your insight and your wonderful, thoughtful comments. So are there any other comments or questions from the board? Member Kaiser?
I think this is a very, very well done, very, very carefully researched report. I walked a lot of these properties, and I think we should accept it as stated.
Okay. Member Miller?
Yeah, just a couple of, I guess, more or less typos or housekeeping items. We went over what is noted in the staff report as recommendation 4, and I don't think I've missed recommendation 3. So I think, should that 4 be a 3?
Yes.
And then I kept looking for recommendation 3, but I only remember voting on 2 amendments so far, so. And then the other mention I wanted to make, 17 contributing properties in the district, non-contributing properties proposed as 11, that equals 28.
I think the additional parcel was one that was an empty lot.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And then the only other sort of housekeeping item I have would be on the exhibit A and on the vicinity map. Spell check wasn't working on the word existing, so just make a note of that the word existing is misspelled several times.
Thank you for that.
Throughout that document. But I would just say, yeah, kudos to Ken for taking this on. What a lot of work and what a wonderful job you've done. And also kudos to Vice Chair Nelson for all of the comments that he had. But in this case, I'll defer to the wisdom of staff and recommend we would go forward as staff has proposed.
Okay, Member Hanson? Oops, you're on mute. Sorry.
Instead of unmuted, sorry. I just have a general comment on, the whole process and looking at something from a 1989 preservation perspective to a 2021. And I think, there was probably much less professional expertise around deciding what was and what wasn't a contributor. And of course, that's going to account for some changes in what's contributing and non-contributing. And I'm just sort of responding to board member Nelson, the differential in some of the count, but I think we do have to realize that this was done to today's standards, to the standards of the ordinance. And I'm also willing to go forward with staff recommendations for the district.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay. Seeing no further comments, may I have a motion, please?
Are we voting on recommendation 4 or 3? Or
It's 4, but it's 3.
okay. So should we say 3?
Adopt the changes as outlined above. I so move.
Okay.
The changes as outlined above.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kaiser, a second by Miller. Is there any further discussion on that item? So, yes. Nelson?
Yeah, I'm just want to say I'm disappointed that nobody else will discuss at length and in detail the buildings that I brought up. I was very thoughtful and careful to bring up what I did. And it saddened me that there's not some further discourse on this amongst this board. I have the utmost respect for staff, and they know that. And I don't discount any of the work that they do. It's extremely valuable. And I do know that everything that was done in this district work was done by today's standards. And I do know that things today are very different from 1986 when this was first put together. And I'm incredibly cognizant and respectful of that. I guess I would just ask if staff had any feedback to anything that I brought up or mentioned before we take a final vote on this. It seems to me like that would be the appropriate thing at this time.
Mr.
Sure.
Lyon.
I'm happy to do that, Member Nelson, and I appreciate your questioning of these various sites, and I'll give you some thoughts on the ones you mentioned. With respect to the Conklin residents, my recommendation on these that are homes is to not just dismiss them, but to establish them as their own Class 1 historic sites. And in the case of this particular building, to the best of my knowledge, it did begin life as a single-family home and then was converted over to use as a club. So its original construction was that of a house. And yes, you could look at a club use as something that could be considered within the commercial nature of a particular commercial area. But I worked with this based on the fact that it was a house. And I think that its very long use as a club can be recognized and distinguished as a standalone Class 1 site, which is what I'm recommending. And the reason that I would assert that is, again, I don't feel that it really is of a commercial nature. It was built as a house. It really is part of a residential tract, but I see no reason why it shouldn't be recognized for the reasons that you state. And that's why I was recommending it as a Class 1 site. On the, let's see here. The Interior Illusions Building, that is the Reed Clinic. That is, actually, it's very interesting when you go back and look at the original documentation. The Reed Clinic includes this building, and it also includes what is currently known as the Alcazar Hotel. And at some point in the past, those two properties were subdivided. And if you look at the aerial photo, you can actually see there's a great big new concrete masonry firewall that separates this building from the main hotel. So however ownership machinations have changed, it's interesting to note that at one point they were all part of the Henry Reed Clinic. My recommendation on this as non-contributing was really based on the comments that you made, that the building has a certain shape that still reflects its volumetric composition when it was built. But in looking at it in its present day state with the canopies removed and the clay tile removed and so on, I felt like it had really kind of lost its historic integrity in terms of the architecture of it anyways. I'm not strong in my position on this one. If the board wants to move it over to be contributing, I'm not going to argue with you on that. But my feeling in its current state is that it's been pretty heavily altered. With respect to the 849 building, I was looking at, I've taken into account both my evaluation, that which came from HRG, and I also took into account some of the opinions and assessments that have been done in the past, most notably by Patrick McGrew. And, I think all of us hold a pretty strong point of respect for Patrick's historic preservation work. And on the case of the, post office building, on page 35 of Patrick's report, his comment was altered beyond recognition, integrity compromised. When you look at some of the older photos, and I believe you can find them in one of the other attachments that I shared with you, you can see what this building looked like when it was the post office. I'll see if I can quickly find it here for you while I'm talking. Again, I think that the building has, with the windows and things punched into it. If you go to page 20 of 25 of this particular report, you can see an image of the building when it was a post office, in which that large window did not exist, and in which the canopy that goes over the porch was much thinner, more in the classic mid-century modernist style, and it has been since clad in a pretty heavy stucco canopy. So I felt like it had been quite seriously compromised when you really compare it to its original shape. Patrick did as well. So I kind of leaned a bit on Patrick's credentials in feeling the same. With respect to Whitewater Mutual, every building that Frank Lloyd Wright did does not set the standard as being an outstanding building. And I think the same can be true of any architect. And in the case of the Whitewater Mutual Water Building, yes, the building still has its central entrance. It still has its two punched windows on either side of the entrance. There's been, embellishments, if you want to call them that, on the building, trying to make it look more streamlined, modern, or some might say deco. This building, again, I felt like it's not one of the better examples of Albert Frey's work. It does not necessarily demonstrate his modernist theories of architecture or his use of utilitarian materials like you see in the Frey House 2 or in the Yacht Club building down at the Salt of the Sea. So I did not look at this building as a particularly notable example of the work of Albert Frey, and because of its modifications, I recommended that it not be included. With respect to the building at 888 North Indian Canyon Drive, which is currently the Barefoot Inn, again, I looked at this building and I felt like it had been so heavily altered and modified. The Burns signature features that we all celebrate are gone. There's nothing about this building that would inform you that it's a Burns design. And it's unlikely that you're going to see, if you go back and look at when it was prior to this building, it was the Morningside Inn. I believe it might have been a clothing optional resort, but even its current iteration relative to the time period that it was the Morningside Inn, you can't even recognize them as the same building. And so it was for those reasons that I recommended that this building be continue to be listed as a non-contributor. So that's basically the gist, and I appreciate your opinions and reasons for your belief on these things, but that was why I came to the conclusions on the ones that you noted.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, and I agree with most of what you said. So thank you for taking the time to respond, and I think it's important for all of us to get answers to questions. So thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for this valuable discussion. Really enhances all of the points everyone's made. Are there any other comments or discussion points? Anything? Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor by Kaiser with a second by Miller to approve the recommendations in the staff report to complete the processing of the amendment. So is there any other discussion? So I'd like to call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, seeing none. Motion passes. Now we've lost rows, so we're down to 5, 5-0, so it passes. Thank
And,
you.
and the last item in your evaluation is the boundaries. And there is I'm digging here in my paper, I can't find it, but in your paper, there is one that shows the current boundaries, and then there's one that shows the proposed boundaries. And I'm recommending in what I've listed as recommendation number 5, which is actually recommendation number 4, to amend the boundaries as shown on that exhibit.
Okay, understand. So may I have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Miller. May I have a second? Second by Nelson. Is that a second?
Yeah.
Okay,
For clarification.
okay.
So the clarification would be, because I noticed in one of the boundary drawings that the recommendation of the Tronet building, which is currently Trio Restaurant, was not included in the new boundary line.
Oh, that was my mistake then.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull this up. Just bear with me just a quick moment, Member Nelson. And
I believe it was on page. It's hard to see in the printed version, but in the online version, you can see, not in the staff report, but in the other illustration of the boundaries, where you have the red line that kind of jagged.
Yes.
It appeared that the Dollard building and Trio were not part of the new proposed boundary. I just wanted to clarify, or was that my error?
I will make sure that both Dollard and Tournay are in it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Member Miller, you'll accept that adjustment to the motion? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a motion by Miller and a second by Nelson. Any other discussion about that? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, anybody opposed? No. Okay, so that motion passes 5-0 to amend the boundaries as proposed. Okay, is there any other points, Mr. Lyon?
The only point that I will make at this point is I am graciously accepting and humbled by your ability to move through this as quickly as you did. I really appreciate the work that you have done in analyzing the work that I have done to get this moved together. The next steps on this is going to be some outreach to the neighborhood, which we're required to do by the ordinance. And so I will begin doing that work. And once we have that communications satisfactorily completed, we will get this prepared for consideration by the city council along with your recommendations.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it was pretty complicated and quite layered. So, and thanks, Vice Chair Nelson, for helping us understand those points that you made as well. So thank you very much. Now let's proceed to agenda discussion item 5A. And it has to do with our 2022 Preservation Matters Symposium. And happy to report that the subcommittee for the symposium and the tours has been meeting regularly. Every month we meet to develop the topics and the presenters and the timing, and it's a huge job, and we have a lot to still develop. But we have settled on the title, which is Preservation Matters: Historical and Architectural Diversity. The Symposium and Tours will be held over 2 days, April 23 and 24, 2022, at the Convention Center. Both days will be at the Convention Center in Palm Springs. We have a capacity up to 400 attendees. So we'll see how we proceed in developing that. We have approximately 16 presentations in total and a dozen or more tours to specific sites. And these site tours will be limited to an appropriate number depending upon the site, such as maybe an average of 30 participants per site. The presentations and production will be coordinated with Deborah Hovel with help of others. And we're still working on timing, and after the new year and into January, then we'll start working on PR and marketing and moving forward with our next plans. I believe that each member of the board did receive a draft of our programs, and would like to ask if Jade or Dan would like to add anything to this report at this point. In the interest of time, we've been going along here for 2 hours, but open to any questions or comments. Mr. Nelson.
Just a quick one. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this has been sent to a fellow HFPB board members. So I would encourage each board member to look carefully at each of our presentations. And if you have any suggestions as to how they relate to our title and whether we can fine tune or tweak the title to better reflect what is being presented, we welcome that input. We want something that's appropriate and catching. Historical and architectural diversity is good, but for me, it could be a little better. So now's the time for us to do all that tweaking, and that's all.
Mm-hmm. And if you have any suggestions that you think of tomorrow or the next day, please feel free to send your comments or ideas to us as well. We don't mean to put you on the spot right now. Okay, are we good with that? Okay. So let's proceed with agenda item 5B. Ken, you want to report on the B of A?
Yep, I'll make this very brief. As I mentioned to you in the last month, we did receive a certificate of appropriateness application from the Bank of America, which is City National Bank, 588 South Palm Canyon Drive. The matter that I wanted to bring before you, this is going to be a staff level HPO approval on this because the scope of it is characterized as a minor. But this particular detail, which is a revision on the privacy screen at the outdoor automatic teller machines. In your staff report, there's a couple of pages of memo that shows what the existing one is and what is being proposed. And I'm going to just refer to this particular image that shows you kind of what the new one is. I believe that this is going to be a vast improvement in terms of the work that was done on this building in the last 10 or 15 years regarding all the handicap accessibility stuff was all kind of done in a very ham-fisted way. And it's unfortunate. But what we have here is an opportunity for some of this stuff to get redone in a way that I feel is more architecturally appropriate to the building. So what they're doing here at the ATM station, which is what I wanted to share with you specifically, is that curved painted white perforated screen and tubular steel columns will be removed. And in its place would be a series of anodized aluminum fins that are reflective or relate to the vertical anodized fins that are on the storefront above the two doors there on the north side of the building. I do want to share with you, I received a letter of public comment on this particular item in which a user of the bank suggested that the screen be open at the bottom. You'll note on the drawings that I had shown you here, the screen goes from the concrete floor up to about the top of the ATM. And when you look at the existing one, you can see that that's kind of open on the bottom. And this particular person who is a member of the bank, who's got their account there, suggested that that opening is important because it helps a person at the ATM machine sense whether there's somebody on the other side of the screen. So I will be forwarding that information on to the bank representatives with noting that that was a suggestion from a member of the community. But I wanted to share this with you, get any comments you may have. There's a couple of more details on the building that I'm still waiting for them to bring back in the form of some landscape stuff that's mostly dealing with replacing a lot of missing landscaping and shade trees and things like that. But any comments that you may have on this particular detail on the bank?
Nelson?
Oh, yeah. I'm not a member of this particular bank, but I have used that ATM before. And I've used many ATMs throughout the city and around the world. And anytime there's been a structure or a wall or something, it always makes me feel uncertain that someone could pop in, or that there's no easy escape in case, you know, someone comes up to you and tries to grab your money from you or whatever. But also in Palm Springs, my bigger concern actually relates, I think, to the homeless, which has become such a problem. Unfortunately, walking down Palm Canyon Drive yesterday, right in the heart of downtown, in front of the new Starbucks, I saw 2 homeless people laying on benches in the middle of the day. And I have seen them sitting in front of the Robinson building. I've seen them sitting in the vestibule at the Art and Architecture Design Museum. They find these little spaces where, you know, they can be in a corner or behind a screen, and they just take over until someone comes along and forces them to move. So I worry about that. So I can see why they had an opening at the bottom of the old one. It's actually pretty smart. Also prevent trash or debris from accumulating. So with the high wind we get, you know, there'd be a little trap there. So it might actually be pretty clever for that screen to be exactly as designed, but maybe not quite as wide. Maybe it doesn't come out as far. Maybe it's a few fins shorter. So instead of, you know, being that wide, maybe it's a little narrower slightly, and maybe it doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the concrete, except for the 2 on the end, just to kind of tie it together. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Member Miller?
Yeah, both Vice Chair Nelson's comments and the comment that staff member Lyon had received are in line with what I was thinking. There needs to be some CPTAD, you know, crime prevention through environmental design sort of analysis kind of applied to this. And there are standards for ATMs, and a couple of those would be the bottom would be open, and I would say to a minimum of 3 feet, at least from the ground up, should be open except for the necessary structural supports. And then, as Member Nelson said, cut that screen back because it seems to be a little excessive and would create somewhat of an uncomfortable and sort of unknown feeling for someone using that ATM, as well as the whole homeless issue. So with those comments, I'm fine with this, but I think those modifications are really important.
Thank you.
What are those standards? Is that building code?
No, they're put together by a number of different professionals throughout the country, including police, that offer insight into how to make development less attractive for opportunistic crimes. I mean, there are a lot of simple things that we might, you know, gloss over, but we've thought about a couple of things here is pulling it back and lifting it up so that somebody can't either sleep there or hide and attack somebody that comes around the corner to legitimately use that. So yeah, they're good. They're good
The bank-
standards.
You'd think the people maybe designing it would know there are some standards.
Well, I think your comments tonight are excellent comments, and I will convey those on to the bank as well. The last thing I just want to mention is related to this building also. There is a project that is being moved forward. The city council has apparently made a preliminary approval on, which is to convert that intersection that's just south of the City National Bank building to a roundabout, right traffic circle. And so it's a very interesting project. It will be our first traffic circle here in Palm Springs. And so I've seen some early designs on it. I'll be working with the bank to also coordinate the landscaping on that project with the bank's landscaping, which is going to be pretty simple. But just wanted to let you know about that. It's kind of an exciting first for Palm Springs.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lyon. This report completes today's agenda. Are there any comments from the board? Of course, Vice Chair Nelson.
Yeah, just a couple of things, because this is the time when we usually bring these things up. And I will just preface these comments by saying if staff could report back at the next meeting on these things, I would really appreciate it. I know your time is valuable, but these are important. The first is Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is the Craftsman historic site. It's a church on Alejo Road, just west of Palm Canyon Drive. It's been missing its plaque, its historic marker for quite some time. I believe it was stolen at the same time that the American Legion plaque was stolen. It also does not have its original statues of Christ and the Virgin Mary on either side of the door. They were originally white alabaster or marble, and they've since been replaced by painted plaster figurines, which seem to change. And right now they look really horrible. And some of the tile, there was some porcelain tile that was added to the front and bottom of the facade many years ago without permission. Some of that has been removed, revealing the original pink plaster facade. And it looks bad. They should either remove all the tile and restore it back, or fill in the missing tiles. So I walk by that one every day. So that's kind of a sore point for me. And then two other buildings. One is class 3, is the former Casitas La Quitas, 450 East Palm Canyon Drive. It's across the street from Caliente Tropics. And my understanding from social media is that the owners have a cafe in Idlewild, and they bought the building and it's been condemned, or there's been something done by the city to prevent them from operating a business there because of water damage or mold or something to that extent. So I just wanted to say, because it's class 3, that we should maybe take a look at it and get a report back from staff on it.
Is that, you said the address on that was 450 East Palm Canyon?
450 East Palm Canyon, yes.
Okay.
And then the final one is 1100 South Palm Canyon Drive, which I believe is the corner of Palm Canyon and Palo Verde. And this board, or not this board, but the HSPB approved that site for demolition years ago. And it was a former Union service station in the 1940s. And I see that there's some remodeling going on there, that the building, in fact, has not been demolished. So I'm just curious if there's a report or an update on that.
I'll try to find out. I did notice the same thing.
Great. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to mention the Our Lady of Guadalupe. That's on Algo Caliente tribal land, I believe.
It's the northerly end of downtown, so I think it's within non-tribal land, but I'll find out.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of right south of Just Fabulous.
I take it back. That's actually Our Lady of Solitude.
Oh, You're talking about the Lady of Solitude, are you?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes, I knew it. I knew it.
And Guadalupe is the other one over by Arenas.
Okay, I knew you were talking about that one, but
Sorry.
it's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so any other comments from the board this evening? Any other comments? Okay, does staff have any comments?
Thank you very much for all your hard work. Oh, there I see Director Fag has come on. Maybe he's got some comments.
I've got just a couple of quick things. Because Vice Chair Nelson brought up the issue of the smoke tree earlier, I just wanted to let you know that the Planning Commission and Sustainability Commission are going to put together a subcommittee to work on tree preservation in the city of Palm Springs. So one way or another, that smoke tree might be saved. Secondly, I just wanted to let you know, I think you're all aware that Mr. Lyon has been promoted to principal planner and will be the urban designer here within the department. We do have the historic preservation officer position posted. Unfortunately, we have not received applications that quite meet our standards in terms of credentials yet. We are extending the position to December the 20th. If anyone has training both in historic preservation and planning, and I realize that those are two rather specialized fields, we would certainly welcome any applicants who have training in both of those areas. I know Member Hanson, you have worked for municipal governments in the field of preservation. Mr. Miller, you also have worked in municipal government and may know individuals who may be qualified. So please let people know that that position is open through December the 20th. That concludes my comments to you all this evening, and thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments or further discussion about anything?
My only comment to all of you, which I may not see you in person between now and then, but please have a very safe and happy holidays ahead.
Yes, yes. So seeing no further discussion at 7:42, this meeting of the HSPB is adjourned to the meeting of January 4th, 2022 at 5:30. And thanks to all of you for your participation this evening. And I also send you best wishes for a happy and safe holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.